How do you protect a historic site? That is an ancient historical site. Do you do it by making it off limits to human beings, that is American citizens, or do you just simply hire a guard to keep an eye on the place at night? Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story. We'll get to this in just a moment. It's a big story coming out of neighboring Utah. It's 9:33. It's 76. You're listening to News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Did you know that your hearing health, I want to tell you about my friend Dr. Christine Pickup for a moment, though, and your brain health are connected? At Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert, she has been studying the research on cognitive health and hearing. The most recent findings prove that when hearing loss is addressed with hearing aids, the effect of cognitive decline or effects are greatly diminished. Hearing is critical for your communication, and of course, it's great for listening to our program. I have a little bit of self-interest in this. For connection to others and for overall well-being, now is the time to improve your hearing. You can do that by calling Mount Harrison Audiology for an appointment today. Dr. Pickup's number, 208-312-0957. We need to remember, too, as well, that she is now the only locally owned independent hearing healthcare practice in southern Idaho. 9:35 now, and thank you for joining me this morning. Pravda-on-the-Potomac, the Washington Post. Check out this headline. A major Native American site is being looted. Ooh. Will Obama risk armed confrontation to save it? Ooh. Well, I'm sure they're looking for it. Well, we can shoot a few more conservatives, and that will be a few conservatives less. President Obama, the writer says, Juliet Elperin, is weighing whether and how he can leave his own permanent imprint on history by designating about 2 million acres of land known as the Bears Ears as a national monument. Despite the uniformly acknowledged historical significance of the area, some people regard the conservation efforts by the White House as classic federal overreach. In the current era conflict between Washington and the rural Westerners, the idea of a Bears Ears national monument has produced warnings of a possible armed insurrection. Ooh. In a state where the federal government owns 65% of the land, many conservatives already resent existing restrictions because they bar development that could generate additional revenue. Of course, they make it sound as if it's just conservatives. You could be a Democrat living in the area and believe that the federal government already has too big of a footprint. But of course, that's not the point the Washington Post would like to make. It's those conservatives. We know what those conservatives are like. It can't possibly be our fellow travelers. No, it's those conservatives. They're looking for another armed confrontation. And, of course, they go on to cite the Malheur Wildlife Refuge this past January and mention that being one of these. But it says that the government needs to step in and do this because you have a lot of old pueblos there. And, in fact, it says that in one of these pueblos, you walk inside, there's an old piece of corn still sitting on a floor. And the old wooden beams are still located in many of these buildings. And it says that that they're being looted by people who come in the dark of night and walk off with all of the artifacts. Okay, well, let's back up a little bit here. So you've got this site, which is probably, I'm assuming it's not the 2 million acres Mr. Obama would like to seize for use by the federal government. Again, that's 2 million acres. We're talking about a pueblo. I'm not aware that pueblos were that large. You might be talking a few hundred feet on one side and a few hundred feet on the other, so perhaps, you could be talking 20, 30,000 square feet total. So why would the federal government need to seize 2 million acres in order to protect this site? Here's a thought. How about just, because if you grab 2 million acres, then you have to bring in all of these federal people to look over the 2 million acres and ensure that, American citizens don't actually step foot on this now hallowed ground. But if you've got just, 30,000 square feet of old buildings, how about a night watchman? I mean, what's it cost you to put a night watchman out there? Maybe give him a sidearm and say, if anybody comes by, shoot him. That'll solve the looting problem. After you gun down the first, 10 or 12, likely none of the others are going to come back. So you put somebody out there at night, a couple of lights just to make sure, and a couple of trip sensors, and you'll find people coming out trying to loot the place, and you can arrest them and put them away, or as I said, shoot them, which could be an alternative if they try to get violent with you. But why do you need 2 million acres? I've got less than a minute, but I'll squeeze a caller in here very fast. Caller, you're on the air on KLIX.
Good morning. Hey, you're talking about this deal down in Utah. I came through Utah yesterday listening to the Utah station, and there's a very liberal talk show host in Logan, and I'll tell you what, he was even against this two bears thing because it's just, him, and he was just saying the same thing. It's just a big government grab, and it affects the Navajo Nation and the Ute Nation, and it totally eliminates any chance of them developing natural resources or having jobs on all of that land.
He is spot on. I thank you for the call. I've actually heard that fellow's show before. Yes, he is liberal. But even on a stop clock is right twice a day. 20 minutes away from 10 o'clock. Want to thank you for the telephone call. Beautiful country to drive through. I wish there were a few more gas stations. But then again, there won't be if the government gets its way. 76, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Well, more on how your government is at work trying to destroy your life coming up in just a few minutes. Now, what the federal government could do, instead of taking land and then telling you can't use it, would be to try to provide jobs in many of these rural parts of the West. There's a fellow writing in the Washington Examiner today who has a novel idea on how you could go about doing this. I'll share that with you in just a moment. It's 944-76. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. I do want to remind you tomorrow morning between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, we'll be joined by one of the medical professionals from Tripp Family Medicine right here in Twin Falls. And we always take a topic, separate topic, and talk about it on a weekly basis, usually related, though, to your lifestyle or your life. And you have an opportunity to call and get an answer to a question perhaps you may have as well from one of the professionals. Keep in mind, you can also call if you have an issue that's it's even off topic because they deal with this every day. Let's face it, in family practice, you're dealing with, that's why they call them GPs, general practitioners in many cases, is because they're dealing with all sorts of different things, troubles people are having when they come into an office. Also, Dr. Tripp and his family are going on a mission trip. That's coming up to Nicaragua in just a few weeks. His sons have to pay their own way, and they are looking, obviously, for someone to hire them to perhaps do some odd jobs around your home so they can raise the money to go on the trip. And they're also looking for toiletries to take to a part of the world where they have very little in the way of those things. So just want to remind you about that. Tripp Family Medicine is located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office right here in Twin Falls. This is a fellow by the name of Paul Kupiak. He is writing in the Washington Examiner, and he writes, let's relocate the federal government. Now, one of the problems we hear about modern government is that once they get to the Beltway, a lot of your representatives around the country and your U.S. senators, they sort of forget where they came from, and then they get swept up into the Washington party scene, and they don't get to come home very often because of sometimes the vast distances, and they're wined and dined by lobbyists. And that the lobbyists then have undue influence on the decisions that are made in Washington, and often those decisions are made and they don't benefit you. Take the trade pact that was being worked on with the Pacific countries. And Americans across the board said no, and government said yes, yes, yes. Why does government ignore the majority of Americans? Because the guys at K Street, that's where all the lobbyists are headquartered. They know all the people who can raise the money to help you win re-election. So, of course, perpetuating yourself in office, George Will once said, you have too many people serving in government. They treat, these are his words, but still love this. He said they treat their public office as private property. And so you end up dealing with that. Well, this fellow writing at the Washington Examiner believes if you make government more diffuse, then you break the power of the lobbyist cartel. He writes, one of the first steps the president-elect should take to restore balance is to move federal government agencies out of Washington and distribute them throughout the country, targeting low-cost locations that need a catalyst for growth. Many towns and cities across America would welcome the economic development that would accompany the arrival of a stable, well-paid federal agency workforce. With modern communications technology, there is no technical reason that requires federal agencies to be located in the Beltway area. Why must the headquarters of the Department of Homeland Security be in Washington? Why not in Texas or Mississippi? The FBI could just as easily relocate to Utah or Vermont instead of to an expensive site in the nearby D.C. suburbs. And he asks, shouldn't the Department of Agriculture be situated in a state that grows something besides home-use marijuana? 947, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Look, back in the 1780s and 90s, it made sense to centralize governments, state capitals, and the national capital, building great big edifices and having everyone come there together and sit down and have deliberations and discussions and then come to votes and make decisions. And then the idea was they were supposed to go home, but going home was an arduous task. You had to get into a carriage, and that's why the country, when it wasn't very big, think about that for a moment. Even in 1850, when California was admitted to the Union, and we had then Washington and Oregon come in, and you had people that had to go overland, and they were lucky that the railroads finally reached across the country within 20 years of admission of California, making it a little easier. But still, if you were a representative or you were a senator from that state, you had to get on that train, and you still had a journey of a couple of weeks. So you couldn't really keep in contact with your district unless someone sent you a message via telegraph. Times changed, though. We developed telephones. We developed faster trains. Then we developed airplanes. We built the interstate highway system. So now even someone like Lisa Murkowski, who's a U.S. Senator from Alaska, she can get home at least, I would think, once a month to deal with her constituents. She has a lot of flying time, that's true, but if she leaves on a Thursday, she should be home by Friday morning, and she can then head back to Washington on a Monday morning, so she can have at least a little bit of time with some of her constituents who are spread out, of course, across a great mass in Alaska. But now we have the internet. You can teleconference. Why is it, for instance, even with your legislators, that they have to go off to some far distant place, be wined and dined by a small group of lobbyists? Why couldn't your legislators have a teleconference and vote via the internet and come to their decisions? Because I remember working with a friend. He was building a distance learning project. This was nearly 15 years ago. And I went to his offices. He was in the basement of a hotel. And they could have a school teacher sit down in that basement, and that school teacher could talk to students across the country and across the world. In fact, he signed an agreement with the government of Malaysia, and he was having people teach business courses out of this basement, and the Malaysians were sitting in distant places across the seas, and they were sitting there taking the course that way, and they could also talk back to the professor. In fact, they had looked like a chalkboard, and you could sit there and you could write questions, and the professor could answer them, while the professor was standing in that classroom in that hotel basement. And then the University of Maryland signed up for the technology, and I don't know what became of it. I moved on, and I haven't had any contact with how that project worked since then. But with the rise of the internet, all of this has become so simple and so easy. This morning, I sat down before the show. About an hour before the show, I sat down in front of my cell phone. I have a Facebook app on the cell phone. I opened up the Facebook app, and it asked me if I would like to post, and I can hit go live. That means I can actually sit here and talk over live with video over Facebook. And I do this most mornings before the show. So an hour before I went on the show, I was sitting here talking into a camera, and I was live on Facebook, and I was talking to people who might be interested in what was coming up on the program today and offering a little bit of pre-commentary. Why is it that your legislators need to fly off at great expense, and they have to have stipends and the like, and they have to go off, to Boise or in many cases, your state capitals, or even to Washington constantly to run the business of government? They don't, not in the modern age. You could all be doing it from, if you could have a special session of Congress during an emergency where you could have everybody just, sit down in front of a camera in their own dens, back home in their own districts, and they could get some serious business done without having to wait for them all to fly in and reconvene and, we need a quorum. Well, I'll tell you what. Why does the quorum have to be in one room? Why can't they all just be looking in online and doing it that way? But, again, that would take big money out of politics and might actually give some power back to the little guy. And I suppose the folks in Washington, they love that revenue. In other words, coming into their own bank accounts, their own campaign accounts. So it's not going to happen anytime soon. 9:52, Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. The thing that always gets me about people in government is you'll tell them something like this, and they'll say, yeah, great idea. Well, what are you going to do about it? Well, I'm going to do absolutely nothing about the great idea. No. We have a caller with us. You're up next. You're on the air on Top Story on KLIX. Good morning.
Hello?
Good morning. Go ahead.
Hey, you're talking about a special session and teleconference and whatnot. What if you had, say, someplace in the county courthouse or at the library where they would have to do that teleconference from, and your constituents could actually sit in the room with you and you could discuss things with them as you're discussing with the committee?
Yeah. And it would work just perfectly. Set up a camera and off you go.
Absolutely. Then there wouldn't, we always suspect there's shenanigans going on, but there certainly couldn't be as many shenanigans if we're there, could there?
No, I think in some cases that would make them behave themselves.
So there we go. We could let's make it mandatory. Have the sessions be held at the library so that we can go and take part as well.
And maybe check out a book or two. Thank you very much for the call, sir. Great idea. 9:53. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 77. And one other idea that I think is a great idea today. This comes from the Daily Caller. There's a fellow by the name. Well, let me just give you a little bit of background on this. We've talked on the air before about the threat of an electromagnetic pulse. There we go. And what would happen to this country if someone detonated a bomb in a particular spot high enough in the atmosphere to take out our electrical grid? Or what if there's a big pulse coming out of the sun? When this has happened before, too, back in the 1850s and 60s. We've had to deal with these issues in the long past where it fried a lot of those telegraph lines. We do know that if somebody actually did this to us, that we could be down for up to 2 years in this country, and we would have tens of millions of people dying because we just simply wouldn't be able to look after them, the old and the young and the people who are suffering from all sorts of other illnesses and that would need that constant care because all of a sudden they would be alone in cold hospitals without any electrical current coming in to run a lot of the machinery that we need to keep them alive. So a writer by the name of Craig Boudreau says, one entrepreneur has an idea to place America's energy needs underground to harden them from potential EMP attacks. Again, people in government talk a good game about this, but nobody ever does anything. Alexander McDonald, retired head of NOAA's Earth System Research Laboratory, he's also the current director of numerical weather predictions Inspire Global, plans to build an underground highway for America's energy needs. His plan, if the country were to, if we were struck by an EMP, to build a vast underground direct current infrastructure to help the country if the unthinkable ever happens. McDonald said in a phone call to the Daily Caller News Foundation, the idea is a market-driven solution, which would ideally not cost taxpayers anything. It allows private companies to bid for sections of the new energy interstate and build it at cost to the companies, not taxpayers. McDonald said he hopes to earn wider support for such a program precisely because it isn't government mandated. And it mentions there's been a 6-year study on all of this, and China is already going ahead with a similar plan. Well, if they're doing it because they recognize the threat that's out there. How long in this country have we been having people talk about this? Oh, look, there's a news camera. An EMP is a dangerous thing. We need to take precautions. Oh, now the news camera's off. Say, where are we going to go have whiskey after session? Oh, wait a minute. Camera's back on. We need to take care of this EMP threat. Camera's off. All right, let's have another shot of whiskey. Someone just has to take the bull by the horns and move ahead with this and get it done. And as he pointed out, companies out there would be willing to come and do it on their own. And so you said, tell them, we'll give you a right to so much underground passage here. You set it up. Of course, it'll help you with your eventual business, too. It safeguards your business, and you'll still be able to profit from it. Go ahead and do it. And that way, if the evil Iranians or any of the other ne'er-do-wells around the world ever decide that they'd like to mess with us, wouldn't matter. They could detonate their nuclear device over Kansas City up in the atmosphere, and there might be some fallout from that, but the grid would hold, and then we could go back and smack them to the point where we'd never have to hear from them again. And if you actually build it, then likely no one is actually going to try to take out your electrical grid because it wouldn't make any sense. So I'm telling you right now, it's a great idea. It won't go anywhere because Washington will talk about it in front of cameras and make lots of speeches and tell you what a great idea it is too, and then they'll go back to same old, same old. 9:57. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Hey, I don't know if it's today, but Buck Sexton will be filling in for Rush Limbaugh someday this week. We had a conversation briefly in Napa the other day when he was speaking at the Republican convention. And again, he said, remember, deliver me a huge audience. So don't go away, folks. It could be one of the Marks. It could be Mark Stein. It could be, there's any number of people who fill in for Rush. But we do know that Buck is going to be doing it at least one day this week. And I just wanted to pass that along, put in a plug for him, too, as well. It's 9:58 coming up on 9:59. News is next, though, from Fox. Then, of course, Fox News at 1 o'clock this afternoon. Sean Hannity will follow Fox. And Glenn Beck after Fox at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Bill Colley with you this morning, and I hope to get back here tomorrow and do this all over again, God willing, and the creek don't rise, between 8 and 10 o'clock in the morning. And I hope you have a great day. Stay cool out there.